Hi guys, it is the end of the day and this is Daily Mail episode 19 and we're going to talk about surrender because that's really hard to do and I know it is. I'm going to talk about two different incidences in my life. One was a desperate surrender or not even a desperate surrender, but an I give up kind of surrender. And the other one was a very disciplined surrender. So, and I'm going to tell you what happened. In the first, my hair's bothering me. I'm going to get a haircut next week. In the first incident, and I'm sharing these stories, they're about my children. I have not called and asked them permission, but in the past I have asked permission and they were like okay with that and they know their mother well. Anyway, my oldest daughter was molested by my brother-in-law when she was 10, and I did everything within my power that I knew to do as a mom to protect her and to validate her and all that stuff. He went to prison and she went to counseling, and I separated us from the other family members because the entire family just felt like she was supposed to forgive and we were supposed to just move on, and forgiving meant act like nothing happened, I guess. Anyway, forgiveness does not mean that, just so you know. Forgiveness means that you let it go. You forgive. It doesn't mean that you have to condone it, nor does it mean that you have to be that person's friend. But when you come from, again, a religious background, those kinds of things get really murky. But anyway, that's a whole nother story for another time. Right now I want to talk about surrender. She, by the time she was in high school, she had a pretty good high school. It's probably after she became suicidal. She was on a lot of antidepressants, a lot of psychosomatic or drugs for psychosis and things like that. And it was all stemmed from, we say, the molestation. There's probably other things too. She probably has some anger towards me while I was a single mom. I worked a lot. There's probably a lot of stuff, but mostly it was that. Anyway, so I had her in and out of doctor's offices, medications, all that stuff. I brought her home from school one time and had her committed because my idea was that if they could just take her off of all of the medication and start from scratch, then perhaps they could get her medication right. There might be something wrong with that. Maybe she didn't need as much or whatever. But they didn't take her off of all the medication. They just started replacing the medication. They did have her scholarship reinstated because they said there was no way she could have possibly maintained her schedule or her grades based on what she was going through. Anyway, so she was back at college. 3 weeks after she's back at college, I get a call from her desperately crying, "Mom, I can't do this. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here." I said, "Just hang on, I'm coming." She was 3 hours away. So I drove up to Shreveport and got her. And I told her, I said, "I don't want you to worry about anything except understanding that we love you and we want you to be here. So if all we ever do for the next however long is sit in that recliner, is you just sit in that recliner and let us love you, that's what we're going to do." I didn't know what else to do. So probably another few weeks went by, maybe not quite that long. I was going up to my bedroom and she was crying. And when she heard me get to the top of the stairs, she cried, "Mama." And I went in her room and she said, I can't do it anymore, Mom. I just want to die. And This happened when she was 10, so now she's like 19. So this was like 8 or 9 years of struggle and trying to help her to, overcome this. And Mom was exhausted too. And that night I said, Jillian, if that's the only solution that you can think of, because I don't know what else to do. I've done everything possible. And if that's the only solution you can think of to free yourself from the pain, then okay. I don't know what else to do. Your dad and me and your brothers and sisters, your brother and your sisters will be upset and will be angry at you, but eventually we'll get over that, and whenever we think of you, it'll only be with love. We had a long talk, and I told her, I said, there's a scripture in the Bible that says that God knew you before you even formed in my womb, and He had good plans for you. He never meant for you to suffer harm. At this point, I didn't know what to do, what to say to her, to give her the desire to stay in this life with us. So we just talked for a long time, and then I hugged her. And I didn't know if that was going to be the last time I would ever hug her or not, but I hugged her. And I walked out of her room, and whenever I walked out of her room, I lifted my hands and I looked up and I said, God, she's yours. Because literally, I did not know what else to do. Literally, I wasn't saying, God, she's yours, save her. I said, God, she's yours. Like, she's coming. She's coming to meet you because I can't fix it. And then I went to bed and I went to sleep. I literally went to sleep. The next morning I got up and I was walking back to the stairway and she said, Mom. And I walked in her room and I said, what? And she said, I've been up all night long. She decided that it was her medication and she wanted to get off of it. And I don't prescribe this for anybody. This is what we did. It's very risky. But at this point, I didn't care. And she said, there's a 10-day process to get off of this medication. And on the 7th day, I'm going to be so out of control that I'm going to want to hit you and kill you and all that other stuff if you don't give me my medication. She says, no matter what I say, no matter what I do, don't give me my medication. So I said, okay. So I took off and we stayed home. I stayed home with her and we detoxed her. She is a fabulous mother of, sorry, I didn't bring Kleenex for that lady who said I should blow my nose. I'm sorry. She's a fabulous mother of my two beautiful grandkids, and she's very involved at the school, and she has a beautiful life. And it's because I surrendered. I got out of the way. And this is something that sometimes whenever, especially when our kids are concerned, I think we get in the way of what the universe is trying to do with our kids. Because we think it's our job to fix it, even whenever they become old enough that it's, this is their life now. But anyway, so that was a desperate surrender or I gave up kind of surrender. Now we're going to fast forward to last year whenever I was having lunch with my sister, and she said, I'm that kind of mom that if something was going on with my kids, I would want to know. I said, oh yeah, absolutely. And somehow I knew what was coming. So then she showed me a text from her daughter, between her daughter and my daughter. And my daughter had been involved, this is my baby girl, been involved in some very risky behaviors, one of which was cocaine. And she says, what are you going to do about it? And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do about it. She says, well, if it was me, I'd be going right now and get her and bring her home until she can act like a grown-up. I said, well, That's you. I don't know what I'm going to do about it. I said, the first thing I'm going to do about it is pray about it. So I came home and I laid down and I prayed and asked God to show me, what do I do? And this little movie played. It wasn't a dream because I wasn't really asleep. I was kind of in between awake and asleep. And this little movie played. And she was here and I was shaking her and telling her that she, didn't need to be doing drugs and all that other stuff. I got the drugs from her, threw them somewhere. She cried and said she wanted to do better, all that other stuff. The next day, I was out in the yard. This is all part of the little movie. I'm out in the yard talking to somebody, and I see her walking to her car, and she's dressed appropriately, and very prim and proper, and she's got her bag slung over, and she's walking toward her car. But I see something hanging out of her bag, and I go, and it's the drugs, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" And I try to get to her, and it's like I'm suddenly in slow motion, and I can't get to her. And I don't remember what she said, something about meth or something. I couldn't understand it. And at that time, it's like I came out of it. Like I was wide awake and alert and scared and fearful. And I tried to go back into meditation so I could figure out what was I supposed to do. And then I heard my oldest daughter's name. And I said, "What?" Because by this time I stood up and I was sick. I was like sick to my stomach, feeling out of control, like I don't know what to do. And I heard my oldest daughter's name. and I said, "This is Judith." And it's like my guide said, "You have to surrender." So now, Miss Control Freak here, who has always taken care of everything on purpose, except that one time whenever I gave up, now I needed to, on purpose, surrender and trust that the universe was going to take care of my baby. So whenever I talk about surrender, I know it's hard because every time the thoughts would come up that I need to go do something, I would say, "You have to surrender." I would give it back to the universe. I can't really tell you exactly what steps to take because I don't really know, except that I just kept giving it back and saying, "I trust you. I know you saved Jillian, and I trust you with Judith." It was like a constant game in my head. And whenever my sister called and said, "Well, what did you decide you're going to do?" And I said, "I'm surrendering it." And she says, "Well, that doesn't make any sense." And, so she started telling me what she thought I needed to do. I said, "Well, I feel like I got a message directly from God himself that I need to surrender. So that's what I'm doing." And I did it every day. And today, that child lives on her own, is practicing yoga, and, is just a whole different, I'm not saying she doesn't go out with her friends or anything like that, because I'm sure she does, but it's like she's got a whole different attitude about life. And I think that the truth would have been, if I would have gotten in the way and tried to handle it myself, it would have backfired on me. Not because I was being punished, but because there's some things that we're not supposed to handle. So the biggest thing I had to surrender was the fear of losing her. But like I said, the only thing I can remember actually doing is saying, "I give it back to you." Every time I would get fear in my heart, I would say, "I give it back to you," meaning God, the universe, my angels, her angels, whoever. "I give it back to you." And it was hard. And when I really couldn't get it off of my mind, I knew that worrying about it was the worst thing I could do. So I would distract myself. I would watch something. I'd call a friend, "Come over, let's watch a movie," and, try to get my mind off of it, because I knew based on personal experience that the worst thing I could do is dwell on it and think about it and worry about it. So I was constantly surrendering. So surrendering is hard, but it's true that out of our heart are the issues of life. Guard your heart with all diligence, because out of it are the issues of life. My daughter who was molested, I think about that story about in the Bible about Job, because Job says that everything I feared has come upon me. Whenever my oldest daughter was molested, whenever she was little, there was a time that she lived with my mom and dad, and I lived a state away because I was trying to build a life for us. And I would come home to visit her every other weekend. And whenever I would get into, when I'd get probably about an hour and a half away, I would just start crying and worrying that did somebody hurt her? Did anybody do anything to her? Where those fears came from, I don't even know. But then whenever we were together and somebody wanted to go spend the night, if they looked weird, I wouldn't let her go spend the night because I was afraid they would molest her. Where did those fears come from? I don't even know. But that thing that I feared the most is what happened to her. So whenever I say guard your heart with all diligence, so Cheryl, are you taking responsibility for your daughter being molested? Probably some of it, yes, because I worried about it. I worried about it before it happened. And it's the things that we keep in our heart that we bring into our life. So whenever we have fear, we have to surrender it. Even if all we do is say out loud, we surrender it. I wrote this down. Somebody made a statement in one of the comments on how do I stop self-sabotaging thoughts. And she talked about not distracting yourself, because then, it like you don't deal with it. You're not dealing with it whenever you distract yourself. And I agree with her about that we do have to deal with it. But in my case, I'm just telling you what I do whenever I've done as much work as I think I can do with it, and it still taunts me, I will distract myself. But I wrote this down the other day, whenever it comes to fear and releasing it, surrendering it. Surrender. We have to learn to surrender. I wrote this down, recognize that what it is, and acknowledge it, and honor it because it's teaching you, or because honor it because it's showing you where there's some work that needs to be done, right? And then release it. So recognize it, acknowledge it, then honor it and release it. Acknowledge it and acknowledge yourself because you're aware of it. And then honor it because it's teaching you something. It's showing you a part of you that you might want to address in some way or another with a therapist or with your spiritual mentor or with somebody, and then release it or surrender it. Okay, so that's the talk about surrender. I hope that was beneficial. I'm sorry for the sniffing. We're going to do the PS. God, guides, angels, archangels, Holy Spirit, I thank you for this community, and I thank you for the lessons that you have taught me throughout my life. I ask you to show us the PS in case there's something I've missed, in case there's something else that needs to be said. Just show us the PS. This is like she's bringing something into her reality, right? Out of our heart are the issues of life. So, and I know if you watched me at all, whenever I get that magician card, it's about we are always creating. We're creating 24/7 with our thoughts and our feelings and what we allow to dwell in our hearts. We're creating our life. So So whenever you have something that you don't want to come out into your life, surrender it. Surrender it 10, 20, 100 times a day if you have to. And if you still can't, go see a therapist to help you surrender it, because out of our heart are the issues of life. They come into our reality. We're never trapped. Y'all, we are not trapped. And sometimes we feel like we're trapped. We feel like there's nothing we can do, but that goes back to our thoughts. And whenever we have those thoughts that there's nothing that we can do, we have to surrender it. Because the best thing that I could do for my daughter in both cases was surrender it. And that is something. So, but we feel like we're supposed to physically do something. But there's another scripture in the Bible, and somebody might have to help me with this, but it's something about we don't war with flesh and blood. It's with spirits and principalities. So it's spirits of fear and doubt that we war with. So whenever we feel like there's just something that we have to do physically, no, we're supposed to surrender it. And that's the best action. I say no. Sometimes, yes, there's something physical that we have to do. Don't mistake what I'm saying. Yes, there are things that we're supposed to do physically. But when we are not supposed to do something, we have to surrender our desire to control it. Scorpio had a message about it's time to detach emotionally. It's like whatever they're bringing into their reality, they're at the home stretch right now. And there's going to be there's a potential for a couple little hiccups. And if they get emotional about it, they could thwart their own outcome. So it's like Spirit said, it's time to detach emotionally. Don't let your emotions, if something comes up, don't let your emotions cause you to thwart this. So sometimes the best thing that we can do is detach and surrender. Some burdens are not ours to carry, y'all. And as a mom, and I know there's a lot of moms out there, as a mom, we do think it's our burden. We do think that there's something that we need to do. Like 5 years ago, I'd have jumped in my car and gone to New Orleans and got my child. I would have. And brought her home and done exactly what I saw in that little movie where I, would have shaken her and said, what are you even thinking right now? You weren't raised this way. What are you thinking? But I've learned way too much about these universal laws and how things really work. And sometimes we carry burdens that really aren't ours to carry, and it drains us and it doesn't help the situation. So we need to put our burdens down. We need to lay them down and let the universe do their thing. We have to trust that the universe truly is doing their job for us all the time. Okay, that is Daily Mail episode 19. Thank you guys so much. I hope this has helped somebody understand surrender, even though that, don't have a whole lot of steps except recognize, acknowledge, honor, and release or surrender. Okay, I love you guys so much, and I will see y'all tomorrow. Oh, the last 4 signs, what Spirit wants you to know, will be out tomorrow. Love y'all. Have a great evening. Bye.